what we're talking about today, ladies and gentlemen, is post-emergent spraying. It is the month of June, working on the theory that the majority of your crops and pastures have been sown and or have germinated, being a naturally germinating perennial. And now's the time to be looking out at your crops and or pastures to see what nasties we have in terms of any insects and diseases and weed population. What does post-emergent spraying mean to you, David?
Well, as the term implies, Pods, I guess it's basically looking to control any weeds within your crop and pasture that may have germinated either at the same time as the crop or since then. So basically anything that you didn't pick up prior to seeding.
One of the real take-home messages that you'd like to put across when we do come to making a decision about spraying, how we go about the spraying, etc. And there's another old mate driving past. But yeah, what are your key take-home messages?
Look, I think the first one's really obvious, and having made a decision as to which chemical that you're going to use for the job, the very obvious one is read the label. And it's something that people often forget. So, every drum of chemical that you buy should have a label on it. This one's got it neatly tucked in there. There's a huge amount of R&D and research and development goes into making chemicals these days, and so there's quite a detailed list of, tells you which situation, which weeds it will control, what rate to use, and then a few critical comments about what situation you're using it in. So just go and find the bit that applies to you, find the weed that you're trying to target, and pretty much everything you need to know is in there, including tank mixtures and if you're mixing chemicals together, what order to mix them in, and all that sort of stuff. It's all in there. And too often, we have complaints from people who say, "Oh, I used this chemical and I wasn't happy with the result." And you go, "Well, did you do this or that?" Oh no. Well, it was actually on the label. So I guess there's a couple of other things that you need to consider. We've read the label. Probably the next most crucial thing is about timing and the conditions when you're actually going to be spraying. And so there's a couple of things to take into consideration. That I'll make go past. Look, don't be spraying sort of early in the morning or late at night if you can avoid it. Avoid spraying in high windy conditions, because when you think about it, you're trying to put the droplets from your boom spray onto the target area and ideally nowhere else. So high winds are going to be an issue. No wind is also an issue, because you do need some wind to move droplets around a little bit.
No wind's an interesting one, David. We all think the calmer the better, and I think on the whole that's generally right. But if you are reading pretty much 0 kilometres an hour, and we're probably more so at the very end of the day, that can lead to some risk with off-target damage.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think one of the other messages we try and put across with our Farmcast here is to be a good neighbour. Off-target damage where you're spraying and, for instance, no wind could end up being chemical delivered across the fence to your neighbour and inadvertently killing some of his desired plants, his or hers I should say. We're not being sexist here, and then all of a sudden there could be some questions asked, and the relationship between two neighbours can then be tested.
That's right, and look, pretty much no one wants to go there. And I guess in the Adelaide Hills, that's one of those things. It's probably magnified a bit because you've got a lot of smaller holdings, and most people have multiple neighbours. And one of the other things I was thinking about prior to this was particularly if you're going to engage a contractor. So not everyone's got all their own spraying gear, and that's fine. It's often more cost effective and efficient to engage a contractor. But just have a bit of a look about the country that the contractor is going to be driving their vehicle or their spray unit across. Particularly if crops and pastures have grown a little bit, you can easily hide a log or a stone or a hole or anything like that. As we look across the fence here, that's just about perfect, I would think. Most people, you could drive a boom spray across that at 20 kilometres an hour without any fear of hitting anything. So, you know, a few hours on the weekend or something spent cleaning up a bit of timber or filling in some holes, picking up rocks, that sort of thing will, again, make life easier for your contractor and ultimately cheaper for you.
Great call, David, and that's something I've learned in recent times, that inadvertently, and this is part of our Farmcast to try and make people aware of where they need to be, what they need to achieve, and like you said, I've had instances where I've had to go around trees and branches, and you can see a lot of these limbs have been down for some time, and yeah, great Saturday afternoon project.
Well, if nothing else, firewood's $450 a tonne, so you may as well get out there with a chainsaw and you know, clean it up, I think.
Oh, it's a win-win for all concerned. It's a win for the contractor, it's a win for your good self and your fire bucket on the Saturday night or any time in the hills, and just, yeah, it just makes it so much easier for all concerned. You get a better result. Less obstacles will lead to less areas where weeds can penetrate, and as you alluded to, we've got a beautiful barley crop here just coming out of the ground. I know this is a continuous crop paddock, but it is almost billiard table like, and agree totally with what you said. You can get over that at 20 kilometres an hour without a problem. Good spray coverage, good chemical application, and dead weeds.
That's it.
Will be the result, and that's what we're after.
Correct.
Just one other question. You've been involved in the what shall I call it, the reselling game and all that. I'm a great believer, and I have to be qualified to handle chemicals. What's your take on ChemCert and the importance of it, and how easy is it or hard is it in your experience to achieve ChemCert accreditation?
It's certainly much easier these days than it used to be. I believe most of it you can do online, and I think for a small investment of your time, it's time really well spent. That's if you're going to be spraying yourself. I actually don't think it's a bad thing to do, even if you're not spraying yourself, because it just gives you a bit of an insight into how chemicals work. You know, favourable and unfavourable conditions, and so if you are actually employing someone, you're going to have a good handle on whether they're doing the right thing or not. But certainly if you are going to employ a contractor, that would be number one. Just make sure that they're ChemCert accredited.
Absolutely, and that's a great call. I think it just doesn't hurt to like you said, David, if you're not going to be applying a chemical, but you've got a greater understanding of the if, buts and maybes, and how a chemical can work, and what obstacles there can be with spraying. And one other one I'd like to touch on from an environmental factor, and quite often we don't see it, but it's just such a huge part in chemical application, is frost, and particularly with our selective herbicides. That's what we're focused on in this episode. Frost can play a big issue on the uptake of chemical, or lack thereof, after spraying, and that is because quite often, and the Adelaide Hills is prevalent for frost, particularly in the gullies and the slopes, that we can have a pretty heavy frost on any given day, and that in turn causes the plants, whether they be weeds or desirables, either or, to shut down to some extent. It, you might be able to help me here, David. It decreases the, wait for old mate to go past, decreases the mode of action and the growth of the plant, and hence if you come along and spray, the plant is somewhat inactive. The take-up of chemical will be much reduced, and the efficacy of that chemical will be much reduced. And I have seen it, I have experienced it. We all live and learn that, yeah, you can waste some dollars by not having done the, just checked out.
And again, that gets back to a couple of things. It's very similar to the same situation in the middle of summer on a hot, dry day when your plants are just about shut down and aren't actively growing. It's the same thing. They're not going to uptake the chemical at the rate that you'd like. I've had personal experience with that many years ago in the Adelaide Hills, where I had a contractor spraying some red-legged earth mite, I think, and he parked his tractor and little, probably 400 litre tank and boom on the back, right down in a hollow overnight. We had a cracking frost, and we went out there the next morning, and what was left in the tank and the lines and the jets were frozen solid. So no spraying till after lunch.
Upon thawing.
Correct. Yeah, which took some time. Yeah, after we
Yes.
chipped the ice off the windscreen. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, look, and again, read the label. That's
Absolutely. So, yeah, I'd like to thank you again for your time. That's been most informative.
Oh, it's my
Thank
pleasure.
you very much for bringing us out here to this lovely location. A late afternoon / evening in very early June. And yeah, most informative, very knowledgeable, and all the best with your post-emergent selective spraying.
Thanks very much, Pods.
Thanks,
Great
David.
to be with you.
Good one.
Cheers.